In this video, I will show you how to rotate an image around a point that is not the origin. Now, part of this process involves rotating around the origin. That's part of it. So make sure you have these rules memorized. Okay? You have to understand, for example, that if you're going to do a rotation 90 degrees clockwise around the origin, the way you do that is you take X and Y, you reverse them, and you change the sign of the X value. And similarly, you can see the rest of these rules. Memorize these rules. Now, here are the steps for rotation. I wrote reflection for some reason. Rotation around a random point. Take a minute to add these to your notes. Write this down. It's a four-step process. Step one, we're going to ask ourselves, what would it take to make the center become 0, 0? Whatever that is, we'll do that to all the vertices. Then we can rotate those points around the origin using the rules that you have memorized. Rotation around the origin rules. And then you have to undo the change that you made in step 2, and then you're done. So problem number 6, we need to rotate 90 degrees clockwise around point D. Point D is not the origin, so we're going to have to go through the four-step process I was telling you about. Step 1, what would it take to make the center become 0, 0? All right, so we're rotating around point D. So what would it take to make point D become 0, 0? Now, point D is one of the vertices of the triangle, but it's also the center of rotation. If you rotate, the center of rotation doesn't move. So in the end, I know that point D is going to stay 0, -4. But even though I know that, I'm going to go ahead and go through the motions of doing the 4 steps because it's useful to see. Right here when I say we do step 2, we make this change, and then in step 4 we undo what we did in step 2. Point D will help illustrate how we're making a change and then we're fixing it. Okay, so if I wanted to change the center into 0, 0, well, the first value is already 0, so I don't have to do anything to the X value. To make the -4 into a 0, I would have to add 4. So that's it. I have to add 4 to the Y value to make it become 0, 0. And that's what's going to happen. So this will become 0, 0. Okay. Now, the next step is to do that to all the vertices. Whoops. So I'm going to add 4 to all of the Y values. So I'm going to add 4 to this Y value, and I'm going to add 4 to this Y value. So this is going to become -1, 4. And this is going to become -4, 0. Okay, so now we did that to all vertices. Now step 3, rotate these points around the origin using rules. We are rotating 90 degrees clockwise. When you rotate 90 degrees clockwise, you switch the X and Y, and you make the X value negative. You keep the Y value the same after you switch it, but the X value changes signs. So keep that in mind. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. Now, if you switch 0 and 0 and change whatever signs you want, it's still going to be 0, 0. So nothing's going to happen to this point. Okay, but on this one, if I switch these around and change the X value, so the Y value is going to go first, and it's not going to change. Then comes the X value, but it's going to change signs. The Y value is going to go first, And then will be the x value, but it's going to change signs. All right, so we have these new vertices. Okay, so we've done step 3. We rotated the points, the new points around the origin using the rules. Now step 4 is to undo what we did in step 2. So remember, in step 2 we added 4 to everything, to the y values. So that means in order to undo this, we need to subtract 4 from all of the y values. So I need to take all these y values and subtract 4. Okay, why do my 4s always turn into little 9s? Anyway, I'm subtracting 4 from all of the y values to undo what we did in step 2. And so what's that going to give us? And this will be the final answer, so we can go ahead and call this d prime. So d prime will be 0, negative 4. Notice that's what we started with, which makes sense because if you rotate around point D, it's not going to move. Anyway, point E prime is going to be 4, negative 3. And point S prime will be 0, 0. That is interesting. So here's what the image would look like if I rotated 90 degrees clockwise around point D. Okay, let's do the same thing for number 7. We need to rotate 180 degrees clockwise around the point 0, negative 1. So, step 1 is to ask ourselves, what would it take to make the center 0, 0? Okay, so this is the center. What would it take to make this 0, 0? Well, the x value is already 0, so we don't have to do anything to the x value. To make the y value 0, we would need to add 1. So that's step 1. Step 2, do that to all vertices. So that means I need to add 1 to all the vertices. So plus 1, well, the y coordinate anyway. So plus 1, plus 1, plus 1. So that's going to give me a new point, 0, negative 3, negative 1, 1, and negative 4, negative 3. Okay, step 3. Rotate these points around the origin using rules. So if I want to rotate these points around the origin, the rules say if we want to do a 180 degree rotation in either direction, we just change both signs. There's no switching, you just change both signs. So that's what I'm going to do. So this is going to become 0, positive 3, positive 1, negative 1, positive 4, positive 3. Okay, now step 4, undo what you did in step 2. In step 2, we added 1 to all the y values. So I'm going to undo that by subtracting 1 from all the y values. All right, and this will be my final answer, so I'm going to go ahead and call this d prime. And I'm getting 0, 2, and then e prime is going to be 1, negative 2, and s prime is going to be 4, 2. Okay, so here's what the image would look like after a rotation around this point 0, negative 1, 180 degrees. All right, so number 8, we need to do a 90 degree clockwise rotation around the point negative 2, negative 1. So again, Step 1 is to ask ourselves, what would it take to make the center into 0, 0? So in this case, if I want to make this into 0, 0, I would have to add 2 and add 1. So that's what it would take. Step 2 is to do that to all the vertices. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to add 2 and I'm going to add 1. Add 2, add 1. Add 2, add 1. So I'm going to get a new point, 1, 6, and -1, 4, and +1, 1. Okay? And then the next step is to rotate these points around the origin using our rules. So if we are doing a 90 degrees clockwise rotation, remember, okay, 90 degrees clockwise, this is where we switch the x and the y, and only the y value gets to keep the same sign. The x value will change. So switch them. The y value is going to stay the same sign. Okay, so if I do that, I'm going to switch them. See how the y value is 6? That's going to stay the same. But the 1 is going to become a -1. All right, I'm going to switch them. The y value gets to stay a 4. The -1 will become +1. All right, I'm going to switch them. Keep your eyes on the y value of 1. It's going to stay a +1. Now I'm looking at the x value of 1. It needs to change to a -1. Okay, so now we've done step 3. Step 4 is to undo what we did in step 2. So, in step 2, we added 2 and we added 1. So we're going to need to subtract 2 and subtract 1 to undo that. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to subtract 2 and subtract 1. Subtract 2, subtract 1. Subtract 2, subtract 1. And then this is going to give me the final answer. So A prime will be 4, -2. And B prime will be 2, 0. And C prime will be -1, -2. And now we'll just plot those points and see how they look. So that is what the image would look like after the rotation. All right, for number 9, we need to rotate 180 degrees clockwise around point Q. Okay, now point Q is the point -1, 0. So the first step is, what would it take to make the center 0, 0? So in order to make this into 0, 0, I would have to add 1 to the x value. The y value is already 0, so I don't need to mess with the y value. So, fine, that's the first step. Second step is to do that to all the vertices. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to add 1 to all the x coordinates. So that's going to look like this, +1, +1, +1. So that's going to give me some new points. This will become 0, 5, and -2, 3, and 0, 0. Okay, the next step is to rotate these points around the origin using the rules. Now, these are the rules we are referring to. If you want to do a 180-degree rotation, whether it's clockwise or counterclockwise, all you do is change the signs. There's no switching of the order. You just change both signs. So that's what we're going to do. So the opposite of 0 is still 0, so that's not actually going to change. But this will become -5. And then if I change both signs, it'll be +2, comma, -3. Now, the opposite of 0 is still 0, so this will just be 0, comma, 0. Okay, now, the last step is to undo what you did in step 2. In step 2, we added 1 to the x value. So we need to subtract 1 from the x value to put it back the way it was. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to subtract 1 from all the x values to put them back the way they were. And then this will give us the final answer. So a prime is going to be -1, comma, -5. B prime is going to be 1, comma, -3. And C prime is going to be -1, comma, 0. Oh, you know I'm saying ABC. It's AKQ. My bad. So this is what the image would look like after the reflection. Hey, notice one thing. Since we were rotating around the point Q, all right, Q was the center of rotation, since that is one of the vertices of the triangle, notice that it doesn't move. So when you rotate, if one of your points is on the center, then it's not going to move. Okay, that's it for the rotation. So there's a couple of review problems at the end I'm going to do, but if you tuned in just to learn how to rotate around points that are not the origin, that lesson is over. You can go ahead and move on to your next video. But I'll just knock these out real quick. Reflecting over the y-axis would be like this. So E, I'm going to go 1 unit on the other side, and that should be my E prime. Notice that point D is on the y-axis, so it won't move. And then S is 4 units to the left, so S prime will be 4 units to the right. So like I said, this will be E prime, and this will be S prime, and this will be D prime. So that's what the image would look like after the reflection. And then finally, number 11, we're going to do a dilation with a scale factor of 1/2 from the origin. When you're doing a dilation from the origin, all you have to do is multiply all of the coordinates by the scale factor. So let's write down what the original coordinates are. So point D is the point 0, comma, -4, and point E is the point -1, comma, 0, and the point S is -4, comma, -4. So if I want to find the image of these points, the scale factor is 1/2. So all I really need to do as I'm finding the image is multiply by 1/2. So D prime, half of 0 is still 0. Okay, but half of -4 is -2. And then same thing here. I'm going to multiply by 1/2, and that should give me E prime. So half of -1 is -1/2. Half of 0 is still 0. That's E prime. And finally, S prime, again, I simply multiply by the scale factor, and that's going to give me -2, comma, -2. So we'll simply plot those points, and that'll be it. 0, comma, -2. That's not at 0. 0, comma, negative 2, negative 1/2, comma, 0, and negative 2, negative 2. So that's what the image would look like after this dilation. When the scale factor is less than 1, the shape is shrinking in size, and you would notice that each of the lengths are exactly half as long as they were to begin with. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Go ahead and click here in the red apple to watch the next video. Click in the green apple to subscribe, or click the yellow apple for the full playlist.